Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the RomaPress podcast. We hope you are doing well. Very quickly, a thank you to our newest patron over at Patreon, Adam SerieA. And of course, thank you to all of our other wonderful patrons who make all of this possible. If you would like to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/RomaPress. And of course, to all of our YouTube subscribers, thank you so much. Uh, as much as I enjoy Andy being flamed for either looking like I'm 12 or my hair, whatever it may be. Well, usually it's the compliments on the hair, but it just somebody made a comment the other day. I've been listening for all of these years, and neither of you look like what I imagined in my head. So after apologizing for that, obviously, it still blows my mind that people listen to this. I don't know. It's difficult. Like somebody, you and I sitting here just chatting, somebody has been at least interested enough for multiple years to listen to it is just astonishing to me. And I can't thank all of you enough. We're both incredibly grateful. If you would like to subscribe, youtube.com/@ASRoma press. And again, that is for the video version and your live streams, man. You are on this thing now where you are pretty close to doing the thing where you're going to need like the lights off. You're going to have the neon behind you, a headset on when you are doing these live streams. Or we'll have to do something where it's like, I don't know if you have seen our good friend Fabrizio Romano's stream. He has this big couch. It looks like a set of a daytime talk show, the way the guy set it up. So yeah. I will have to message him.
That's when we reach the 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's when we bring in the couch.
Yes. Well, yeah. Well, I told Fabrizio to send some of his 25 million people our way. It still blows my mind that there are that many people interested in football, let alone
one of the most influential people on Twitter, on X. According to the numbers, he's one of the top people in the whole platform. So,
wow. I've known him for a few years. We've gone back and forth. We follow each other. We've talked a few. We talk a few times each year. It is so weird because he is younger than myself. I think he's like 29 or something like that. Yeah. I know he's like in between.
He's built an empire. Yeah,
and to think that he was,
I think he was Marzio's lackey. He was
lugging around suitcases for Gianluca Di Marzio less than 2 years ago, and look at him now, top of the world, man. Good for him though, man, because it's he does receive a ton of Hey, speaking of that, before we get into anything Roma related, speaking of chapeau, I loved, and I have to admit, I was a bit disappointed that Antonio Conte did not get, or is not going to go to Napoli. The juxtaposition of Agent Rudy being sacked and Napoli appointing Antonio Conte literally the day after he did an event in Torino with Juve. The juxtaposition of all of those things next to each other, grouped into one single episode of things, would have been fantastic. I mean, Napoli having De Laurentiis having to go out there and just De
Laurentiis went out of his way to openly basically dismiss Rudy Garcia before he even held talks with Conte, and he openly admitted to the fact that Garcia was like the 8th or 10th choice after Thiago Motta, Luis Enrique declined both. So I don't know what they're doing. This must be some of the worst decision making by any reigning SerieA champion ever. Ever.
But you and I said that
we said
the moment the guy got appointed, we had no doubts. I have to admit, I thought this thing. I gave it maybe until February.
That they would be able to disguise Rudy Garcia's complete ineptitude for longer, because maybe
Yeah.
maybe they had some kind of system with Luciano Spalletti. But imagine how bad of a coach you must be in order to turn that Napoli side that we saw win the Scudetto by like 20 points differential between them and the second team behind them, to dominate Serie A that way. And then you bring in Rudy Garcia, and the guy basically wipes the floor with that, with everything. Like the Napoli of this year have nothing to do with the Napoli of last season. Obviously things can always turn around, but already the fact that even Antonio Conte, that is not even just slightly interested in coaching a team that just won the Scudetto, is mind-boggling to me. And I have to imagine what Rudy Garcia must feel like, still being there, still being the coach after these last few days where it seemed like he was never gonna come back to Castel Volturno, so Napoli's training ground. And all of a sudden he's there, and Aurelio De Laurentiis is also there, and now there are reports that Aurelio De Laurentiis is coaching the team himself. That he's
That was the natural progression of how this was always going to end. Yeah, I mean, that was always going to happen at some point. Just as Lotito will do the same to Lazio. I mean, Lotito did the transfer market of Lazio essentially this summer. The
Yeah, yeah.
guy.
No, that I can understand, but it's just
I mean,
when
this
you
is the
have these,
natural
it's SerieA,
arc.
it's SerieA, and also these guys
Yes.
are so old school. They think a guy like De Laurentiis thinks that the solution to the problem, after Conte has rejected you, the solution to the problem is you yourself start coaching.
Yeah. Yes.
Go figure, So thankfully, we
Fantastic.
haven't experienced that with, say, James Pallotta or Dan Friedkin, for the matter. Thank God these
We
guys.
had Ramon Monchi in goal though.
Well, yes,
That photo has to
for
still
one
be floating
preseason
out there
friendly,
somewhere, right?
preseason
Um,
friendly in the mountains, yes, in the Dolomites. Uh, that's thank God those years are behind us. Now
yes.
we get to enjoy a relative, or what I hope to be a relatively cheerful international break. You know,
Well, that depends. Well, your live stream today wasn't
yeah.
cheerful. It
No,
was
it wasn't cheerful, but we still, well, I guess at the base of it was, because we came to the conclusion that perhaps for the first time ever, we can actually say confidently that we're not too worried about not having Paulo Dybala and Lorenzo Pellegrini for a month, which, if you think about this time around last season, the prospect of not having Dybala, which was a reality at some point because he
yeah.
got injured
It's
against Inter and then got injured against Lecce, the prospect of not having him out there was, for us, was apocalyptic, because
yes.
because that team had nothing going for them in attack. So I said it on the podcast, and I said it on the live stream. Now we have 25 goals across all competitions. Last season, at this point in time, we had 12. So last season, without Dybala, we were looking at each other like, what the hell do we do now?
Right.
Meanwhile, this season, at least for the time being, the attack seems to be the one thing that actually works to great effect. So for the first time, perhaps ever, since Paulo Dybala joined the club, we can look at each other and be like, okay, well, it's going to be okay, because, hey, we got Romelu Lukaku and we got Andrea Bellotti, both performing really well, and they can lead us in this moment of need.
Yeah, the thing I find interesting too, and somebody in the group, the patron group chat said this. Uh, did Tammy Abraham pass away? Because in all of the, I know the guy is out with injury. I understand that. I understand that the odds of us seeing him playing meaningful time this season is very minuscule. And by the way, there is no reason to rush. If there was ever a time, because if we want to go through, like, there are some events or a group of events that happen so close together that you can make museums out of it. Roma, if they wanted to do the history of the what is the ACL, the full name of the ligament called?
Anterior
Your
cruciate
cruciate.
ligament.
That's what it is. Okay. I kept thinking Achilles something, but that's a different one.
No, that's this is still the RomaPress research team. So
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
working on
yeah.
overtimes.
Our medical staff was out today. Um, I mean, if we want to make a museum dedicated to the torn ACL ligaments of Roma players of the past 2 decades, I mean, there would be enough to fill that museum. One thing we can say with unequivocal certainty, I can't tell you whether or not the training ground Trigoria is cursed, because every time somebody says we have to change the playing surface, do you know how many times they have done that? They have
I
done
think
that.
like 4 times in the last 8 years, perhaps.
They could put grass on Mars and cover a pretty decent portion of it with the amount of surfaces they have torn up and replanted. Okay, that's been done way more than even needs to be discussed. I can tell you whether or not somebody is sabotaging the ground and again putting curses on it. I can't tell you that for certain. But one thing I can tell you for certain when it comes to these ACL injuries, as we saw with Nicolo Zaniolo, in my opinion, the last thing that we can do is rush anybody back. And there is absolutely zero reason to even consider bringing Tammy Abraham back prematurely. If there is even the slightest molecular sized grain of doubt in anybody's mind, there's you just no, you don't do it. What is the other good conspiracy theory? Via Stewart, where there's a certain doctor there who, would it surprise me if it came out that he instead of repairing these ligaments of the players, that he was just taking the scalpel and put.
The guy basically has the reputation of Josef Mengele. At this point in time, it's just at this point in time, it's like who's operating this time around? Oh no!
Oof.
Oh
Oh.
no! Oh no!
Well, and the juxtaposition of that, particularly because I'm thinking of Zaniolo, the fact that he went to Austria, or no, did he go to Austria to
And
get the second one done?
no, I think that
Right?
was no, no, no,
Oh,
no.
that Milik, that
No,
was Milik.
that
Where
was
he,
Darbo went to Innsbruck. Milik went to Innsbruck to check on his knees before potentially signing with Roma, and Karsdorp went to Innsbruck. Yeah,
I, you never know what you and I will talk about, because again, people don't, maybe they just don't know this. You and I don't say a thing about what we are going to talk about. I just hit start and we start talking, which makes this a way more natural, and b a lot more surprising. I did not expect a Josef Mengele reference at
sorry,
all for this
sorry.
one.
I'm sorry.
Uh,
But the guy does
oh,
have a reputation like that. Like that's the crazy thing,
yeah,
is that football fans in Italy, like now, like if you're from outside of Italy, some of the names don't tell you anything. But once you start seeing the same name, oh, he's gonna be operated on by this guy, you start putting two and two together, and obviously very quickly you come to the conclusion, hey, he's certainly sabotaging these teams by breaking apart the knees of players and then stitching them back together. And why the hell wasn't it his fault that Alessandro Florenzi, after breaking his ACL, was half the player that he used to be? And same thing for Nicola Zaniolo. And so obviously these
oh
are
my
things,
gosh.
these are conspiracy theories. That's all it is. So there is nothing true
Well,
to that. But going back to the initial, trying to, I think, go back to the initial thing.
oh
It's a
my!
good thing
To
that
avoid any lawsuits, we are talking about somebody who has a name that is similar to
don't say the name.
Mirmalo
Why would you say the
Pariani.
name?
It,
No,
it, it sounds something
why
like
would you
that.
say the name? That
Mir,
makes it worse. You just
Mirma.
That makes
I
it
don't know.
worse. You just
Uh,
no, because until if you
Dirdiano Zariani. I think of something
no,
that.
you said it. You said the name. People are gonna go back on the tape, and they can clearly say that you've said the name, and that's
Well,
that's the point, John.
but this
When
is
you mention
something
people
that
on the lines of Josef Mengele, you need to not mention other names.
I'm sure he will enjoy hearing his name in that same breath. Maybe this is just a cultural thing. I have been to a lot of countries. I don't know in any other country if you have supporters knowing by name the name of the
Yeah,
local
of a
surgeon
surgeon,
that
in a specific
right,
clinic. Yeah, it's
right.
crazy. It's crazy.
Yes,
But
yes,
going
yeah.
back to the initial point, which was made, I believe, 15 minutes ago, right when we we started to record. Uh, I believe
Oh
no,
my
it's
gosh,
we go
Mengele. We're
back to
going to get our
Paulo.
first
We go
content
back to
warning on
Paulo
this.
Dybala, and there is we are in a position. It seems like privileged position to exactly do not what we've been doing with a lot of these players,
Yes,
and also Tammy Abraham. Exactly. Now it seems like Roma more and more, Renato Sanchez more and more. Renato Sanchez, I think, caught the club off guard how easily he got injured uh, after that Empoli performance. He plays 45 minutes, he scores a goal, goes into Sheriff Tiraspol. Mourinho thinks, oh, I'm gonna have him play 45 minutes again, just to keep giving him those minutes, just to keep
right.
improving his form. And the guy gets injured not even halfway through the first half. So Roma more and more, I think, have grown aware of this problem, of the issue of the fact that this packed schedule really is grueling on a lot of the physique of these players. There is more awareness of not rushing back. Paulo Dybala has a history of these injuries, and so the last thing Roma want to do is rush him back. And the last thing that right now they need to do is rush him back, because thankfully, the defense may not have been spectacular this beginning of the season, but one thing that has been consistent has been Roma's scoring. So far,
Yes,
it seems like since Lukaku, mind you, since Lukaku came in, since Lukaku was finally integrated in the rest of the team, so after the previous international break, Roma have been flowing in the attack. They have been flowing, they have been capitalizing on chances, which is not something that you could have said at this point last season. So we are at a point where even somebody as important as Paulo Dybala being out for a month doesn't shock us the way it did up until a few months ago when he went out against Atalanta and you're like, holy crap, what are we going to do now? Now we can safely say, okay, 1 month, it's fine. We got this, which is, again, I think it's privileged. It's a privileged position that we
yes.
cannot take for granted.
Yeah, I mean, to have Andrea Barotti being the one that is called into action, and by the way, that is on top of, again, Tammy Abraham also not being available. I mean, if you look, and by the way, that is also not even mentioning. Do you know we had another striker come in that Roma were previously linked with that came in on loan from Bayer Leverkusen?
Yeah,
I
Sardar.
would not, I would not blame anybody if they had forgotten he was even on the team. I have to be honest with you. I caught myself 2 days ago when I was just I was writing something and I saw his name and I thought, my word, he is on the team. I forgot about that. I remember one time him coming in. How many
I think he
appearances
made
does
like
Asmoon
two
have? Is it two?
appearances. He's made two appearances, something like that.
Okay, something like that. I kind of feel bad for the guy, but anyway, I mean, Belotti would, if you go down the list, I don't know how many teams in SerieA he would start for right now immediately, but I would venture to guess of the 20, eh, 14 or 15, maybe. I don't know. I'm just pulling a number from my backside and assuming that, I mean, if you look, I think if given consistent minutes, he's at 3 league goals. I mean, he could
Three
easily
league
have a couple.
goals, two assists, and two goals in the Europa League. So
Yeah. So,
total five
I
goals,
mean,
two assists.
as you said, that is the ultimate. And that goes back to something you and I talked about when it comes to the depth, a position Roma had never been in before. I mean, if you think about prior seasons, just think about how many times where it was just one guy from one department going down and it's season over, done. You lost the season right there because of one guy from one department on the pitch. And it was, it's finished because there's nobody else that they can get. To be in this position now is fantastic. The thing with Dybala, and I saw this conversation going on in the chat. Of course, when this happens, okay, you read some things. Oh well, should Roma keep him? How do you keep a guy like this? Because of course, we know that there has been talk of Roma handing to him a new contract. Roma want to sign him to a contract renewal. Paulo Dybala wants as well to remain at Roma. But is that the smart thing to do with all these injuries? Come on, man. Really?
I mean,
Really?
I'm on the side that thinks that both Dybala and Roma need certain guarantees for the future. I don't think at this moment in time either of the parties will say outright, "Let's go," because Dybala needs the guarantee that he's going to play Champions League. This is perhaps
Yes.
the last shot.
Yes.
He's going to be
Yes.
30. I don't know how this research team is really not.
Yeah, the research team is sleeping.
Okay, let's say
But you
he's
know
going to be
what? He's
30.
29. In
Yeah, he's gonna
1 month, he will be 30 years old. So,
exactly. He's going to be 30 years old with the injuries. That makes him. I mean, he's looking at a much shorter career than others. So,
yes,
okay, he's already has to think that this could be the final phase of his career. So, this has to be the moment where he goes back and plays Champions League football, because so far he's not the star in Argentina. He gets injured at Roma, and when he does play for Roma, he plays either in the Europa League or Coppa Italia, but he doesn't play on the stage that matters to him. And
yes,
Roma are like, okay, well, he's the marquee signing. He is the player for this team. He's the one of the main faces of the team. Whenever the Roma made brand announcements, when they signed the sponsor, when they announced a new jersey, he's the face of it.
he's yes,
But they
exactly,
also need, like him, they need reassurances with regards to his fitness levels, because if you're going to pay a guy over 6 million euros a year, you need some kind of guarantee that he is going to be the face of the team, not only off the pitch but on the pitch as well. And so I think it's just a mutual thing. It's Dybala a player that you want to bet on? Yes, because he has the quality that we haven't seen at Roma in a long, long time. Today, when I was asked on
exactly.
the live stream, who do I consider to be a world class player on this team? I said I can only mention Lukaku and Dybala.
Two,
Those two
yes,
are brought in to be the difference makers. There are no other players like them on the roster.
yeah. And listen, I think that of course and obviously nobody should expect or even tolerate a guy of that quality being injured so often. Okay, I'm not going to disagree with that assertion. I'm pissed off. I mean, I think we said before, you and I, like 2 or 3 episodes ago, you and I said the exact same thing about how we, every time he goes into a duel, you just you're on the edge of your seat. You're holding your breath because you know that at any given moment, Paulo Dybala can end up exactly as he is at this moment. He's injured, unavailable. It's not good. For me, though, we knew this beforehand, though. I mean, it wasn't as if he was a beacon of health and availability while at Juve. In fact, I would venture to say that was probably among the
No,
primary
it was
reasons why the
worse.
guy
It
had
was
to
worse.
settle
No,
for
no,
half of the
obviously,
wages.
obviously,
He
he showed more, I think, now with Roma than he did in the
yes,
final 2.5 years with
100%.
Juventus.
Yes,
Um, Obviously, but there has to be also. It's good that Roma are in a position where even the player that is supposedly the most quality player on the roster, even the prospect of him being out a month, can be considered an okay situation, like a feasible situation that you can deal with, because that's what we were driving at this summer. I said it, if even whether you like it or not, if you didn't like some of the transfers, it's fine, but the point of those transfers was to give depth, to give options. And it's undeniable that whether you like certain players or not, whether you like Paredes, whether you like Usam Wawar, whether you like Romelu Lukaku or not, from a personality point of view or whatever, you got options. You got
yes,
yourself some options. Do you need to integrate some? Do you need to work, for example, on having Bove continue to start for you? Do you need to involve Hussein War more? This is a guy who said openly he's going to give you 7, 8 goals a season. That's no problem for him. Do you need to find a way to integrate Sardar Azmoun? Yes. But I think, again, this is a privileged position that Roma are in, and so now there is the international break, and usually it's either a time of great happiness or utter panic. And right now, I think we're just in the middle of it, because we came off a terrible stretch, but we came off it in a good fashion. We won
Yes.
3 games in a row, and we did so convincingly. And that's what Roma are working with now. And you got Leonardo Spinazzola at the club. He's trying. He wasn't called up by Italy. You got Chris Smalling, Llorente, who are supposed to come back against Monza. You got
Yes.
Paulo Dybala, Pellegrini, both out, hopefully to recover by the Derby on November 9th or something. You got Rick Karsdorp, you got Andrea Bellotti, 2 players who performed really well in the last few matches, getting some rest time, getting some more work done with Mourinho. Hopefully that it really can be a booster, because we say these international breaks can either kill you or they can reinforce you. The last one, I don't know what it did. Maybe it did a bit of both. Maybe it didn't do enough. Maybe it was just
Mm,
it was too much anticipation with regards to Romelu Lukaku slotting into the team. But right now we know what we're working with, so it's just a matter of keeping those that are healthy, and and continuing to work to reintegrate everybody, because this team, man, it doesn't have the quality that some of the other top sides in the league have, and that's all right, because they're on a different level of development and so on and so on. But uh, they still have the quality to compete for the objectives that they set out in the first place, and it's clear as day. Even when you win against the
yes.
Cagliari side that is fighting against relegation, that is not scoring goals, that hasn't won a single game, that's okay, because those are games that make or break you. Just like Salernitana, Hellas Verona broke you to begin the season with, just like Genoa broke you, and so now you're in this international break and you're just waiting to understand, who are you? Are you the team that lost against Genoa, that got embarrassed in the final minutes by Torino, that got embarrassed by Hellas Verona in their own home at the Bentegodi? Or are you the team that scores with ease, finds a way, no matter who's available or not available in the defense, to get a good, stable, solid backline going, and then finds a way also to get other players, the new players, the younger players, to contribute, each in their own way. That's the great mystery of these international breaks. That applies to every team. With Napoli, who don't know what they're gonna get from Rudy Garcia, with Inter, who went into the international break with a shocking late minute draw against Bologna, and
Yes.
so each one of these teams will have to understand, who are we. And with Roma, it's very difficult to tell, because so far they've shown one half that was horrendous, and then hopefully just not a long term option, just maybe a brief stint, and the other one, which the other half, which showed encouraging signs.
Yeah, and I have to be honest too. We both expressed some concern going into the match against Cagliari. Don't blow it. We always have difficulties there. There is something about that match, even though I said, and this is where I'm going to admit my hypocrisy in the whole thing. I would have been okay, obviously, with a 1-0, 2-1, whatever it may have been. But the fact they went out there and dominated and closed the game by the early minutes of the second half, just mentally what that does, not different than the Torino thing. If Roma had drawn 1-1, where Torino scored within the first 10 minutes, Roma responded in minute 35, we feel much different than when Torino scored at the last moment and it's a draw, you lose a victory. The fact that Roma dominated Cagliari, it just makes you mentally, it gives you a different kind of lift. And the thing that I want to see from them coming out of this, I don't know if you took a look at the calendar when play resumes. So we talk about, and you mentioned about Roma, the moments in which they lost points in the early season. You went down the list of the teams they dropped points to. Well, you are kind of still in this phase where you said, you pointed out, Roma, they resume against Monza. You have an opportunity when you come back to get points from an inferior opponent. Meanwhile, when play resumes, Milan, they're going to play against Juve. You have Napoli going to Verona. You also have Atalanta Genoa. And then the following weekend, okay, so this is that midweek or is that the regular weekend? I think that's regular weekend.
Regular.
Then, yes, so then Roma, they face
Face.
Inter,
Yeah.
Napoli, Milan, Lazio, Fiorentina. So when you resume play, those times that, again, you correctly pointed out, where Roma lost chances to get early points, this is where these head-to-heads and these direct clashes, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, to be frank, I don't really see the point in shying away from just saying this openly. Like, you have to win those, because yes, you mess up opportunities against all of these smaller clubs, and you blew it. You blew it in the early beginning, but now you have to make up for it. And this whole thing with the direct clashes, we know it has been I don't even know what to call it, like almost like a cursed subject to discuss, because what happened? We talk about how Roma, they don't win against any of the top four with Paulo Fonseca. And Jose Mourinho comes and they struggle in a couple of them, but they lose the derby, but then they win in Bergamo against Atalanta, but then they lose at home to Sampdoria. And it is kind of an up and down and imbalance, a back and forth of winning the direct clashes and losing. Well, we can talk about it in the next one, but you are now forced to win some of those. You are now at the point where there is no other option. First, when you resume play, you have to beat Monza. There's no discussion about this. You have to do it. And in some of these direct clashes, so you already lost to Milan. You're going to face Inter, and then you have the derby. You're going to have Lazio. You have to win one of those. Which one? I don't know. I don't care. I'm sure most would prefer the derby, but I am just saying you have to win one of them. I mean, you have put yourself in this position. You only have yourself to blame, but you have to do it now. And that's the part that I think this is where we are. I won't say make or break, because it's still going to be November. Teams are still in this very weird spot. Like the team that I have been paying a weird amount of attention to, Sassuolo. To watch them win, one weekend against Juve, and the difficulties they are giving seemingly every single team, or let me rephrase, every single big club is confusing to me. I mean, they beat Juve, they beat Inter, but then they lose to Monza. Very confusing, but I think that is sort of a good metaphor for how most teams are in this early go. You are still trying to find your footing, but this thing of having dropped the points early, and I'll just say it for the final time. I won't ever say this again on another episode, but because you have screwed yourself early on, now you have to unscrew yourself by winning some of these direct clashes. And I know, again, this whole discussion of Roma against Milan, Juve, Inter, Lazio, Atalanta, so on and so forth, it is taboo in a way, because it seemed like that alone would convict Paulo Fonseca as a guilty party. When it comes to judging him and his time at Roma, the only evidence you need to bring and show to the jury is his record against big clubs, and that's it. There's no other choice now, because you have you have to get some of these now. It's not a question of, okay, well, we're facing the big clubs, how can we do? No, there's nothing to discuss. You have to win these matches. And the other thing too is, when, or how far, I should say, do you think and this will be the final thing on it because I hate talking this thing so extensively about the big matches and the direct clashes. Roma are at the point, and I think you somewhat alluded to it, wherein I think sometimes when it comes to Paulo Dybala and needing to play on the big stage, I think sometimes there is sort of a I think there is not a correct balance of how Roma is viewed in terms of their place in the hierarchy of Italian world football, whatever you want to use. I think sometimes we have a certain group. I don't know what is common amongst them that think Roma are bigger than they are. I would say you and I have a fairly accurate look and balance as to where they are. But what I wonder sometimes is going into these matches, we look at the league calendar and you see a way to Inter and you think, oh, well, nearly impossible, yeah? When does it get to the point where Roma, or we should expect Roma to, it shouldn't be defeat, oh, that's going to be impossible. How far truly are Roma from that point? Because I don't know.
I mean, the answer right there is the whole reason as to why we're trying to get to Champions League football. It's one
Yes.
of those things that got nullified the moment we lost out to Champions League football. You immediately drop from, we're not part of the top four, we're part of the top six, the top eight. That's it. That's what Roma did it to themselves. They changed the conversation, they switched the conversation. I watched this Roma team go to the Stadio San Paolo, or now the Maradona, and dominate Napoli on several occasions, under Maurizio Sarri, under Carlo Ancelotti. I remember watching the Roma team dominate Milan at the San Siro, and do the same to Inter
Yes.
with Luciano Spalletti when we won against Milan. I believe it was 4-1 and Inter 3-1 or something like that. So with Neraja Nainggolan scoring bangers and so on. So
Oh, those two goals, man! That
beautiful.
that
Yes,
rocket from that
but
bar.
that's a long time ago, and that's the last time we held those conversations. So
Yes.
now it's not anybody. It's not the fans' fault. It's not anybody. It's the team. It's the team. The team brought it up for themselves, and they have to. And it's palpable whenever they are in a situation where there is a must win, when they go up against a top side. They don't speak about it as if they were in the same conversation. So that is very telling. But that will not change unless you change it. Then you can only change it by going into top four. So Roma now they look at this international break as a time to regain their momentum, because they need that momentum that they had. As soon as it's complicated when you're at a good run and you seem to have figured things out, or at least you're on your way to do so, and then boom, you can't do it, you can't continue, and then you have to regroup, reanalyze, reassess the situation, and you're thrown into the mix against teams that will be difficult. Monza will not be a walk in the park, and neither will be
Right.
Slavia Praga in the Europa League. Both these games will be played before Inter, and then Inter is Inter, and Inter, you have to consider them. You always have to look at them as a team a class above you, and that's how it is for Roma. Until they get top four, that will be the conversation. They will not be part of that conversation. They will not be considered top echelon unless they change the narrative around them. And as you said, it's a must win now. Every game is a must win, but now, especially with the schedule, you just have to clean the and you get rid of that bitter taste that you still can feel in your mouth, that it was left by the start of this season, which showed a Roma that was weak, a Roma that was not up to it, a Roma that couldn't even match the fitness levels of a Genoa side. So
Right. Right.
those are not things that you can get rid of so easily. You really have to prove that you are different by winning. That is the simple, most straightforward medicine for this kind of illness.
I was waiting for another Mengele. I thought you were trying to work it back into your set
No,
there.
no, 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 no. Those are you can't go too dark twice in an episode. You can only go once.
Well, I was waiting for the connection because we were somehow talking about Dybala, and then Mengele gets referenced in there, and but he passed away in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I
Yes,
think so. He was in Argentina.
yes,
Uh,
yes. Never
I
caught,
thought
never caught.
I thought that was somehow going to be intertwined, but thankfully
No, no, no.
we only kept it to one reference of Mengele
Yes.
for this episode. So,
Yeah.
okay, we will leave it there. When we return, we will hopefully have more update on Dybala. Maybe the timetable has changed, but Roma, they will be returning. Monza back into Europa League, and then Inter. So plenty of stuff is going to be happening once this stupid international break ends. So we will leave it there. Thank you so much for listening to us. We greatly appreciate all of your support. So until next time, ciao.
Ciao.